I want to talk about something I'm pretty passionate about, and that's ethical storytelling. So, when I was in high school, I saw a documentary about the Sudan, and in less than an hour, I learned about decades of conflict. I learned about the use of child soldiers, and I learned about this region called Darfur. I really wish I could remember the name of that documentary because it basically sent me on this long journey that I'm still on. My first reaction was, how is this not the only thing people can talk about? Now that I knew that these sorts of things were happening, I needed to do something. I couldn't just have this knowledge and do nothing. I ended up going to school for international studies. I really wanted to work for an organization that was doing something about one of these crises happening around the world. It seemed like just week after week, I was learning about something new happening or something that had recently happened in Sierra Leone or North Korea or Syria. It was intense. Eventually, I got my wish. Today, I work for an environmental justice organization, and I get to work as a storyteller. And that makes me really happy because I think back to that documentary about the Sudan, and I hope I can have that similar impact on somebody else. I hope I can help somebody see a crisis to start to feel the urgency around it and to move them into action. I love what I get to do. I think it's a really great privilege to be able to use creativity to get people to care about things that matter. At the same time, it's a responsibility that I just think needs to be handled super carefully. The longer I've been in this role, the more and more I realize that people in this exact same position for various charities and nonprofit organizations throughout the years have actually done a lot of harm, often without intending to.
Children are dying every day from hunger and sickness.
There is an African saying that says, until the lion starts telling its own story, the hunter will always be glorified.
Where they live, hope is the endangered species.
Hate those ads. Hate the people who make those ads. I mean, there's people starving everywhere in the world.
But
You
in
know,
some
you
of
can
the
give them a
cases,
bit of
you
dignity.
look at the coverage, it's so negative. Some of the things that they used to portray Africa are things that when you talk to ordinary Africans, they clearly don't like it.
They show you these people and there's a starving mother and a starving child and it's horrible. And then there's a celebrity. Always the most important thing is a celebrity who comes out and they speak for them. That way we'll understand.
So that's why I care about ethical storytelling. To me, it's not about, the satisfaction you get by getting to call somebody out. It's not about trying to look cool or look like the one that's doing it right. You just want to do it right because when you don't, people are actually harmed. When we're so used to these images and constantly thinking of certain problems as inevitable, if we're seeing Africa and are thinking it has to be the place where poverty exists because this is the only image we ever get, we're actually working against the change we're trying to make. I see these infomercials and, to me they look so tacky. I want to think of them as a relic of the past, the stuff from the 80s or 90s. But unfortunately, they are still in heavy rotation. Organizations are still making them this year. And it's really, really frustrating. I can tell you firsthand that in every community I've gone to capture stories, people don't want to be seen in this way. People ask ahead. They plan on wearing their best outfits to our interviews, to the time we're going to spend in front of a camera. Just like any of us, people want to be seen with dignity. People want to look good and feel proud about their own presentation. There's sometimes when ethical storytelling just feels really cut and dry. You'll see someone who does it the wrong way, and it'll just seem strikingly obvious. At the same time, there are a lot of instances where things are more nuanced and subtle and complicated. Unethical storytelling is very sneaky. Things like the white savior complex or poverty porn creep into our daily lives without us even thinking about them. I think one of the things that makes this tricky is that ethical storytelling involves a lot of tensions, right? On one hand, you have one way of telling the story that you know is wrong. You've seen people do it, and it's harmful and inaccurate and all that. And so often we swing to the other side, we pendulum swing, and we don't pay attention to all the problems that exist on this other way of doing things. Let me give you a few examples. Okay, so you see poverty porn. You see these exploitive, sensational images of miserable, pathetic kids in black and white or with the contrast all turned up, and you're like, yeah, of course, that's wrong. That's not only unethical, it's ineffective. People don't want to feel guilty or depressed. You want to inspire people into action. So a lot of people have now moved towards positive storytelling, and I get it. I love a positive story, and I think it's a lot more effective to inspire people by the change that they can create versus shame and guilt. The problem that happens is that this often turns into sugarcoating poverty. Have you ever heard somebody get back from a village somewhere where there's a lot of poverty and hear them say things like, oh man, the people there, they have so little, but they have so much joy. They're so happy. They have so much wisdom to share. All right, look, that's true in a lot of cases, right? You'll go somewhere and even in the midst of unthinkable and really difficult circumstances, people can still experience genuine and sincere joy. And oftentimes when we see this, it challenges us to rethink what creates joy, what we really need, all that. Even though this is partially true, I think we can't let that become our permission slip to feel okay with poverty. Poverty is an injustice, and as people who either don't experience it or don't experience it in that context, we need to pay more attention to the systemic issues that we play a role in that lead to that. If we sugarcoat poverty, it kind of gives us an out. It allows us to escape the way that it should disturb us. Injustice should confront any feelings of comfort that we have. Like, it's also equally true that poverty is harsh and brutal, and so many of the people I've met have been very frank in explaining just how devastating their experience was. So how do you do this then? Where do you go? If you don't want to do poverty porn, but you also don't want to sugarcoat poverty and be dismissive of their problems, I think as much as possible, try and use people's own words. Don't put words in their mouth. I think one of the best things you can do is allow people to tell their stories in their own voice. You know, sometimes you will need translation, you will need to set up context, but as much as possible, I've learned, I think it would serve a lot of storytellers well to not get in the way of the story that they're trying to tell. Okay, here's another big one. You want people to care, you want to inspire them into action, and you really want them to see the solutions. How do you do this without appealing to the white savior complex? I'm guessing you've probably heard of the white savior complex at some point.
She's a 20-year-old service volunteer in Africa. She doesn't have any training at all, no formal training at least, but it's all okay because she's from the West, so she has plenty to teach the children in Africa.
So I'm glad this is a conversation that's happening more and more. More people are becoming aware of the white savior complex. People are having an easier time identifying it. And at the same time, it's still something that remains very, very sneaky. It's all over the place in our culture. It's in, the movies we watch to feel good about the world. It's in a lot of the stories we heard growing up. And it is definitely in the nonprofit industry. There's a couple things that help me. First of all, you want to have informed consent. That's like a non-negotiable. You want people to know how their story is going to be used, what you're going to do with it, and to the best of your ability, they get it, and you have their permission and their blessing. The next thing is to think through, okay, if this person were to see the final product of what I'm trying to make, be it an article, a written report, a video, how would they feel? The world's getting smaller and smaller. I've actually had people from remote villages in Tanzania I've visited end up following me on social media. I've had kids in South Africa see videos I've made featuring them in it. Thankfully, every single time this has happened, it's been a really positive experience. But it also just reminds me that we should always make things with this in mind. Sometimes avoiding the white savior complex can feel like a restrictive thing, and believe me, there are some things that are clear don'ts when it comes to that. Here's a big do. Do focus on the local efforts that are being done to enact change. One of the things I like the most about the organization I work for is that in every country we work in, we partner with established organizations from that country. We invest in their leaders, skilled leaders. It makes it a lot easier for me to talk about the work we're doing, knowing that we refers to local community leaders. And as much as I get the opportunity to, I try and highlight that. It's not outsiders from the US or from the Western world coming in to make this change. So when you do talk about the skill of locals, the expertise of locals and their positive characteristics, it kind of brings up another tension. Can you do all this without ignoring kind of the broader systemic issues that create the problems you're trying to solve? One of the most important things about a story is its context. And I get it. You can see a story about a single mom and her kid and how they overcame poverty and how she was able to give him a better life, and it'll feel complete, it'll look good. But there's some other big questions around that. What sort of social support did she have? Why were the conditions around child raising for her so intense in the first place? What roles did race, did class, did gender play in any of this? These things are always there. Sometimes we can allow individualism to creep into our storytelling, and when we do this, we cut the story off from the wider ecosystem where it lives. Now, there's always more layers to the story. There's always contexts. A person's environment is just as much a character in their story as any other human. And it's more and more important that we pay attention to this, especially as we're trying to tell stories that help us connect to one another. So I think one of the most important roles of the storyteller is to cultivate their audience's sense of empathy. Essentially, every time you hear a good story, this is what's happening. You're entering life through the eyes of another person. And when I think back to that documentary I saw about the Sudan, I really felt that. I felt a sense of connection to the Sudanese people. Even though I had never been to Sudan at that point in my life, I don't think I had actually met a Sudanese person. But I did feel that as human beings, we owed it to each other to care. And that was the start of everything for me. In a way, when I started pursuing human rights work, yes, a lot of it was for the problems I wished to solve, but it also felt like I wasn't just fighting for somebody else, but it was also essential to my own growth as a person. And I don't want to say this in a way that sounds like it's centering me. What I mean to say is that, there's that quote, like, if you've come here because your liberation is bound up in mine, let's work together. That's more of what I'm getting at. I think of an ad by World Relief that did this really well. They did this campaign around International Women's Day called Thank God for Women. And so what they did was they spliced up clips showing women in some of the program countries that they work in, engaging in their daily life, side by side with women from probably the US, places where they have donors, engaging in their lives. And they kind of went back and forth, showing a mother in an African country preparing a meal, and then showing a mother probably in the US preparing a meal, teaching kids to read, training for a marathon, and side by side you saw them overcoming obstacles, rising to meet challenges, and that really helped tear down these walls that make us think we're so separate or so different from one another. Of course, when you do something like this, you also want to take the time to be humble and to admit that despite your best efforts, there's always going to be things about another person's experiences, another person's life and perspectives that you just won't understand. I've studied poverty. I know a lot of the facts and figures around them, but I'm not going to pretend that I even know what it's like to have experienced it. I met this guy in Haiti the last time I was there, Nayel. He told me that during the hardest part of his life, he would work 14 hours a day and he would earn about 33 cents. I don't know what that's like. All the studying, all the education in the world doesn't begin to get me close to really getting my mind around what it's like to experience that challenge.
cents. That's less than a small cup of coffee, but it can make all the difference in the world to the people of this village.
Ask for more.
Sorry?
Ask for more money. Why are you starting so low?
You might hear a lot of what I've shared about ethical storytelling and feel like it's a bit restrictive, and it's really not meant to be. It's meant to unleash the best versions of the stories we have to tell. I really think that storytelling is important, and it can help call our attention towards things that matter, things that we really should care about. I want to live in a world where people fight like hell against the things that harm people, and where people celebrate and take extreme delight in the good things. And I think every story well told brings us closer to that. There are two places you can go to do a deeper dive into ethical storytelling. But first, I did basically a longer version of this video for Plant with Purpose a little while ago, digging into some of the practical steps we take to ensure ethical storytelling in our marketing and our media and all that. You should check that out. I'll include a link. The other spot is called ethicalstorytelling.com. Hopefully that's easy to remember given the title. And it's a great resource, especially if you're in the nonprofit space of just resources. There's a pledge you can take to commit your organization to better storytelling. So go ahead and check that out too. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ethical storytelling is something I really care about, and I'm really looking forward to the time where I can get back out there and start telling stories again, and I want to bring you along for them, so please do subscribe. In the meantime, I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you all next time.